Good morning, everyone. First of all, I will be making a statement regarding information on the David Paul case. Dr. Colleen Fitzgerald will also be making a statement and speak about her involvement in the case. And then after that, we will be taking questions. And also, I'll be providing you my entire document regarding what I'm going to say, so if you don't have to worry about taking notes, whatever the case may be. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the Meriden Police Department to share with us some long-awaited news regarding the investigation of the death of an infant that occurred 3 decades ago. A little more than 32 years ago, January 2nd, 1988, I was a detective and received a call at home informing me of a homicide that occurred at the agency parking lot on Evansville Avenue in South Meriden. Upon arrival, I was informed that a days-old infant was found at the base of a tree which was not visible from the road. It was determined by the medical examiner that this male infant had died from exposure to the frigid temperatures of that early January morning. We've also received false confessions. Our personnel have traveled to several states in an attempt to find the identity of this infant. In January of 1988, we received tremendous support from the community. The Meriden Police Department adopted this infant and named him David Paul, which means God's beloved little man. A local citizen donated a cemetery plot at Walnut Grove Cemetery. In early January of every year since this tragic incident occurred, the Meriden Police Department conducted a graveside ceremony honoring and vowing never to forget baby David Paul. In August of 2011, Detective Sergeant Neshy and Lieutenant Burstein began assisting with the David Paul investigation. Prior to that, Detective Sergeant McCurdy, who had since started working for a state agency, had the opportunity to meet with Colleen Fitzpatrick regarding her work in forensic genealogy. And Detective McCurdy got Colleen to work with us and agree to take on the case. In August of 2011, Sergeant Neshy and Lieutenant Burstein began assisting with the David Paul investigation. Detective Walerziak had done so much on it already, and he briefed him on the status of the investigation. We began looking into what evidence we had for the case and what new technology existed, what could be done and what was not done, what could be done now that was not able to be done in the past. Forensic genealogy and family-based DNA was a new thing for law enforcement, and we began to look into using it. Detective Lieutenant Burstein approached the Connecticut Forensic Lab while conducting a family tree-based search using David Paul's DNA. They advised that they could only enter profiles into CODIS, and that we had already done this with the mother's DNA prior to. We were told that there were 2 agencies that, at the time, that were capable of conducting this type of search, and there was nothing that the lab could help us with at that point in time. Detective Lieutenant Burstein reached out to those agencies, which is the University of North Texas, who's a research center for missing and unidentified persons. Sergeant Nessie continued to work the case, doing interviews and running down any potential leads. Around 2012, retired Detective Sergeant McCurdy, working for a state agency, had the opportunity to attend a training seminar that was conducted by Colleen Fitzpatrick, a forensic genealogist. Colleen expressed an immediate interest in the case. Sergeant Nessie and Lieutenant Walerziak began working with Colleen Fitzpatrick of Identifiers International. She was presented the case and decided to take it on. In March of 2017, Colleen reached out to us and offered an opportunity that would ultimately lead to the successful completion of this case. She suggested that we have DNA profiles genome sequenced, and we utilized GEDmatch for the analysis. She had a private party that wished to fund a proof of concept study to see if this method worked for identifying Jane and John Does. Colleen wanted the David Paul case to be a test case for their study. Detective Lieutenant Lerziak was more than happy to accept this opportunity. We began working on getting the DNA to a lab that could facilitate getting us a profile that could be entered into GEDmatch. With the amount of time that had passed, the DNA had degraded, and we did not know what could be done with it. Colleen was instrumental in finding a lab that would handle this type of sample. GEDmatch was able to locate distant relatives of each, but they could not be close enough to start a family tree. Both profiles were searched on an almost weekly basis, but no closer matches were ever located. During this time, Sergeant Nesci would follow up with whatever leads came about. In February of 2019, Colleen reached out to us to let us know that there were news stories of another DNA type that federal law enforcement had been using to search profiles, family tree DNA. She wanted us to get our profiles in before the site shut down, the ability to enter profiles. Lieutenant Burstein gave the okay, and the profiles went in. The site showed the closest match we had up to this point, a second or third cousin. Although this was a major discovery that moved us forward, the match was still a distant relative that may not know their relatives that far out. Early November 2019, decided to take a trip to Florida to talk to the closest match. Sergeant Nesci had retired, and Sergeant Phillips had joined Lieutenant Burstein in the investigation of this case. The day before they left for Florida, Lieutenant Burstein received a message from Colleen. She was coming to Connecticut on unrelated business and wanted to meet in person to discuss the case. Although she was completely booked for appointments for the day, she agreed to meet with him for a few minutes, which turned out to be almost 2 hours. He learned that their team of genealogists had found another distant DNA match to David Paul's mom and built out a family tree for these two recent matches. Both their trees came together to one person. Great news, but still another distant relative of the mother. With the information from their trip to Florida and the distant DNA matches, Colleen was confident we were moving in the right direction for potential matches to David Paul's mother. Of note were female relatives that lived within the neighborhood where David Paul was found in 1988. On the 32nd anniversary of finding David Paul, the decision was made to make contact with one of these relatives. The contact led us today in finding closure for the David Paul case and the city of Meriden. The mother of David Paul is identified as Karen Kuzmak Roach. Ms. Roach was approached by Detective Lieutenant Burstein and Detective Sergeant Phillips on January 2nd, 2020, which is the 32nd anniversary of the death of David Paul. These two detectives exercised excellent interviewing techniques and obtained an admission from Karen Kuzmak Roach of being the mother of David Paul. Ms. Roach indicated she had been waiting 32 years for the day in which the police would be knocking on her door regarding this incident. A positive DNA test was completed by the State Forensic Lab last week. Notable people that were involved in this case that I want to thank, of course, is Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, Identifiers International, Colleen's team of genealogists, Deputy Chief Retired Mark Walerziak, Detective Sergeant McCurdy, who was instrumental in making the contact with Colleen back in 2012. Sergeant Rob Nesci is also retired. Detective Lieutenant Burstein, and Detective Sergeant Shane Phillips, who were instrumental in taking that information to the next step. Joy Riho of the Connecticut Forensic Lab and the DNA unit of the Connecticut Forensic Lab, who over the years has dealt with us regarding several samples that have gone back and forth. Now I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, who will give a talk about her involvement in the case and how she was able to be instrumental in us solving and bringing this to closure.
I want to say how much I appreciate all the effort by the Meriden Police Department all these years to keep at it. My involvement started in 2012, so I feel like a newcomer to this. I first met Keith McCurdy in 2012, and he mentioned the case to me then when I happened to be at a meeting here in Hartford, and it went from there. I did the Y DNA in 2014, came up with possible last name, and in the course of time, it developed into something else. In 2017, I was approached by Dr. Margaret Press, another forensic genealogist, about trying to use autosomal SNP testing, the big genealogy, the kind that eventually identified the Golden State Killer. But this was a year before then. And she had an idea that perhaps that kind of technology could be used to identify John and Jane Does and, used for cold cases. And so we looked at all the cases that I had been involved in, all the agencies I knew, and we were looking for an agency or two that was really forward-thinking, that would see the merit in trying something else, that had such a compelling case they really wanted to solve, and we decided the Meriden Police Department would be one of those two agencies that we could believe in. And so I remember the call to Rob Nessie and Mark Waleriziak, outlining our idea, and I could tell they were so touched and so anxious to go forward. So Margaret and I spent the better part of 2017 figuring out how to do this, because those companies like Ancestry and 23andMe that are very well known now, they don't take forensic cases, so we had to figure out a way to do it on our own, and that took most of that year. So this is a landmark case. This is one of two original cold cases that were approached using this new way of doing things, new approach to forensic identification. This was a year before the Golden State Killer. And I have to credit the Merritt Police Department with being so forward-thinking to really trust us with moving forward with their very valuable DNA sample. So that being said, it was a long haul. It was a lot of work. We worked on it since probably, this was one of the first cases to go on GEDmatch in late 2017, the now famous GEDmatch. It's been a long haul since then. It's been a couple of years just putting that genealogy together. I met with Steve Bernstein last year just for those couple of hours to outline the plan, where we were going with it. The Meriden Police Department again came through and put their efforts behind all that, and I'd say together we have a success story. And, this is an example of how this works. We live in a revolution in human identification. There are a lot of controversies over using genealogical data for this kind of case, but you can see where it goes. You can see the release. I don't believe there's anything such as closure, but there is release. There is now the ability to move on. So I encourage all the genealogists, all the people out there to consider, uploading the GEDmatch, opting in for law enforcement. I know that, that's a tricky question, but you can see the positive benefits of doing this. So I thank everyone for coming out today and supporting this, and I hope we can go on from here. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions?
She talked about the mom waiting 32 years for police to come knocking on her door. Did she say why she never came forward?
She indicated that she had a lot of remorse, obviously, for what occurred. The day that they knocked on her door, cold, they could tell right away that she knew through DNA. They had started to mention relatives, indicating that they were there originally because she had lived in the neighborhood at the time of the incident, and we were reinvestigating a cold case. And through the DNA, and when relatives start getting mentioned, she knew right then and there that we were onto something that would ultimately close the case.
How old was she at the time?
25.
Did she share any reasons of why that decision was made 32 years ago?
She indicated that she was in a very bad state of mind at the time. She was in a relationship at the time, and that she had delivered the baby herself, and that she had dropped the baby at the base of the tree, and that she had made a call to the South Meriden Volunteer Fire Department at the time, but only indicated that there was something along the lines of something that they need to look for in the parking lot of the AGC. Well, there were two parking lots to AGC, and this was actually in a wooded section that was not visible from the street. So that's, and then she said she had lived with this for obviously the last 32 years.
Chief, did anybody know she was pregnant at the time?
No. She claims no. She claims that she hid it with loose clothing at the time, and that no one but her knew.
And did she seek medical treatment after giving birth?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And was this relationship abusive? Did she give a reason as to why? You know, just everybody's wondering, why did she make that decision to give birth on her own and leave the baby there?
She did make a note of the safe haven law that had it existed. She would have taken advantage of it.
Will she be charged?
At this point in time, we believe that she will not be charged, and we're looking at a manslaughter, which has a statute of limitations of 20 years. So that at this point in time, we believe she will not be charged.
And when you say bad state of mind, can you go a little bit more into that? What does that mean?
In the near future, we still have some follow-up to do with this as far as the father's side. So we need to close up that loophole before I elaborate on that bad state of mind.
And did he know, the father, did anyone know that she had given birth and she was...
We do not believe he knew anything about it.
Did she identify the father to you?
She did.
Are you releasing his identity?
Not today.
Did she have any other children?
No.
How are you guys feeling today? This is obviously a big case, 32 years, and to finally find some closure, that must be a relief, emotional.
Yes, it is. It's obviously 32 years is a long time. And over the years, these guys worked on it, so it is. It's quite a feeling of accomplishment, a feeling of closure. So it's a good day for us.
We looked at maybe other departments, maybe a lot of departments in our area have cold cases as well that they've been tirelessly working on as well. And we hope that this is kind of a beacon of hope that there is that technology out there that we can find answers to.
Well, Colleen's a very busy person. I mean, she speaks all over the world. After I found out about her, I started to YouTube her and her organization, and she's an amazing person, amazing to to hear. You just can't stop listening to what she has to say as far as how she puts the family trees and connects it to the location and the DNA, and she did this all without. I mean, she found the funding for us at the time and didn't charge us anything for it, which is unbelievable. Which is not the case at this point forward, if anybody's considering, because obviously she has expenses. She has worked on some very famous cases, and I cannot see a reason why this DNA information is not open to law enforcement, a lot of it, at this point in time, because you're solving cases, and you're solving it through second and third cousins, but there's still a lot of legwork that has to go on with it. That's why I said when they decided to knock on that door on January 2nd, cold, and they started their investigation and their interviewing techniques, before they left there, they had basically an admission, which ultimately led to the closure. So,
Chief, do you say she lived in the area at the time and
Yes.
still lives in the area?
no, she does not still live in the area. She lived on New Cheshire Road at the time of the incident, which is about 2, maybe 3 blocks away from the incident of where the baby was found.
Did she mention if she ever named the child?
No, she did not. I don't believe she ever named the child.
Had she watched the news coverage? Did she ever consider coming forward prior to this?
Lieutenant?
So, she said that she at first saw some of the news coverage for the first couple of years. It did seem like it was something that she wanted to repress and didn't really want to bring up. As far as coming forward, she said it got to a point where, you know, what use is it coming forward? She can't go back and change anything. But she did feel that ultimately we would be knocking on her door and she would be discovered.
Did she mention if she had ever visited his gravesite?
She had not.
And she lives in Florida now?
No. The second and third cousin live in Florida.
Oh, okay, she still lives in there? I'm sorry, I didn't catch
Yes,
that.
she lives in Connecticut.
Did she ever remarry, or, I'm sorry, did she ever marry?
Yes, she did.
So she's married?
She is married.
Doesn't have any more kids.
No.
She just wanted to check something. You said she said she called the fire department? Is that?
She made a call after delivering the baby. She indicated to us that she made a phone call to the South Meriden Volunteer Fire Department, but was extremely vague about the information regarding there's something along the lines of there's something in a parking lot. This was on December 28th that call was made. So the baby was actually, we believe the baby was left on December 28th and found on January 2nd.
So the baby, you now think the baby was there for 4 days?
We believe it. We believe so, yes.
Were you able to go back in records and determine?
We did
if-
determine that that phone call was made, that it was verified.
And obviously, they went to these areas trying to look
We went
see
to-
if they could
yes.
find something.
Yes, they did. They went, but again, it was an item or something along that lines. You need to find something in the parking lot, and the parking lots, both, there's 2 of them actually. They were both searched with negative results because the baby, I remember the baby was not visible from the road. It was at the base of a tree.
Colleen, would you mind answering a couple of questions up
Not
there?
at all.
Okay, okay.
If I can.
Sure. Could you just talk sort of in layman's terms about this technology which allowed the discovery to be made?
Yeah, let me just briefly explain what happens, is that when you take a test of one of the direct-to-consumer tests, Ancestry is a very well-known company, they test your DNA on 600,000 points, called SNPs. And then they put your data in their big supercomputer, and they figure out how many points you share with other people in their database. And the more points you share, the more DNA you share, the closer you're related. So when you put your DNA in there, you'll come up with a list of what we call DNA cousins and how closely they're related. And that's easy for us, but when you have a John or a Jane Doe, or you have, let's say, a cold case homicide, your killer or your John Doe is not going to spit in a little cup. So, you know, those companies don't take forensic cases, so we've had to develop a way of getting those 600,000 or so points in another way, independently, kind of cheating a little bit on Ancestry, and then uploading to GEDmatch, that independent database. So we have that figured out. So what we do is this. We put DNA on GEDmatch, for example. We get a list of DNA cousins. We don't know who these people are, their names, email addresses, and without contacting anybody, we figure out who they are, and we start building their family trees. So let's say we take the top 20 DNA cousins, anywhere from first to third cousins or whatever. And we're going to notice as we build those trees, they start connecting. Because if all of those people connect to our John Doe or our suspect, they're going to start connecting to each other. And in the ideal case, we're going to have 2 groups develop that are connected to each other but not connected to the other group. So ideally, if you're looking at 10 DNA cousins, 10 are going to be in one group. 20 DNA cousins, 10 are going to be in one group, all interconnected. 10 are going to be in the other group, all interconnected. But they're not going to connect to each other because you have the two parents there. And so our challenge at that point is to find one person in one group that has married a person in the other group, and their children will be connected to all the DNA cousins. And their children, one of their children is the person you're looking for. And that's what happened in this case. We were able to have the two groups, and we connected them in the middle, and one of those people was, we actually had to work with not only David Paul's DNA, we had the mother's DNA. So we focused on the mother's DNA, and we got those two groups, and we found connections. We knew one side was Italian, had Italian ancestry. We knew the other side had Polish ancestry. So we were looking for someone who had Italian-Polish ancestry, and there were only a few people in that big Italian family that had married Polish. So one of those turned out to be the mother. Sometimes those two groups are distinguished because they don't connect, but you can also identify them by different ethnic backgrounds. In this case, we had Italian and Polish. So sometimes it's a little more subtle. It can be a little more complicated than that, but basically that's the way it goes. That's the Reader's Digest version of how we do this.
Clay, how long did it take to do all the, I'm going to say this word wrong, genealogy, detective work?
We started late 2017. We did have some gaps in change in personnel, like any company will, where we had some other compelling cases that demanded our attention, but basically we started in late 2017, so it really took about 3 years. Anybody else? I want to encourage everybody. We have, in our world now, we have, a toss-up between privacy and public safety. And as the chief mentioned, we're normally working with second, third cousins, so I'm not so concerned with privacy myself. You get that far away from your person, your unknown person, you're really not involved. So I would encourage everybody to really think that through and really read up on some of the issues and make an informed decision on whether you'd like to go and take these tests, and if you do, whether you would like to download your results and upload them to that independent website called GEDmatch. I would encourage everybody to do that because you can see the positive outcome that has brought about. There are many suspects, killers, other perpetrators taken off the street. We've identified, and I work on those cases through identifinders. I do the cases that would bring criminal charges. I also do baby doe cases and child doe cases. And on the other hand, I'm also the co-executive director of the DNA Doe Project, where we do John and Jane Does. So you can see all the people that have been taken off the street, all the success stories at identifying John and Jane Does. So we have a lot of good coming out of this. So I would encourage everybody to look at those tests, really make an informed decision about how you feel about the privacy versus public safety. I hope you decide in the direction of public safety and you decide to upload to GEDmatch. If you do, take these tests because look at the results that you can bring about.
And Colleen, just one more time, can you just share the organizations we all have it on, or the group that you're working with?
Yes, my company is Identifinders International. I founded it back in maybe 2005. I renamed it and reorganized it about 2012. I do suspect cases where there may be criminal charges. I do baby doe cases where there may be criminal charges. I do child doe cases. I do military identifications. I've done a lot of historical. I've been involved in historical plane crashes. I've been involved in the Titanic baby, the Amelia Earhart Project, Abraham Lincoln DNA Project, a lot of historical cases. I've also done a lot of Holocaust work. I've helped child survivors of the Holocaust who have absolutely no idea who they are. I've helped them find their families and be reunited with their families. There's still many people alive today from that era that have no idea who they are. I do adoption searches. That's Identifinders International. through DNA Doe, we're a 501c3 nonprofit that is based in California. My co-executive director is Dr. Margaret Press. You can visit our Facebook page, dnadoeproject.org, or our website, and you can see all the success stories. Our oldest case, we recently identified a John Doe found in a cave in Idaho. Torso was found in the 70s. Arms and legs were found in the 80s. It was thought to be a recent homicide, but it turned out it dated to 1916. The guy was still wearing a red sweater that he was reported missing in. So that's our oldest case. And of course, we have found, runaway teens. We've found identity fraud, identified identity theft. There's a variety of people that go missing for different reasons that are never reported. So all that technology is still the same. It's just the side of the law that it falls on. So I'm the founder of Identifinders International. I'm also the co-executive director of the DNA Doe Project. Are there any more questions?
I have a question for the chief. Chief, you've spent pretty much your entire career, this case has been in the background since you were a detective.
Yes.
You've obviously spoken to the mother. She admitted that she did it. Doesn't sound like she could give you, at least from what you can release now, a clear reason as to why she did it. And it doesn't sound like you can charge her. Is this closure truly, after the toll it's taken on your detectives, on your department?
Whether the individual, the mother, is charged or not is not our call. I think the main mission was to find out not only who the mother was, but why. And we did find out who the mother was. We have a good idea who the father was. That follow-up will happen after this, right after this. And whether the individual is charged or not at this point in time really does not affect my closure, personally. I know Sergeant McCurdy, when I met with him last night to discuss this case, and he has since been retired, 46 years counting both agencies, 40. Sorry, Keith. But if you look back there, I mean, he walked in this morning with all of the clippings of the newspaper articles since 1988. I'm saying, wow, who keeps that stuff? And so you talk about somebody that's really involved in this case and took it to heart. It would be Keith and many of the investigators that took part in this.
You said it's not your decision. Who's making the final call on whether charges?
That would be the State's Attorney's Office in New Haven, and I believe that the fact that the phone call was made to the fire department, and we can prove that the phone call was made on the 28th, which she indicated. She's been very straightforward with us. I think she wanted to get all of this off of her chest. The difficult element would have been to prove the intent to commit murder, which there is no statute of limitations. So I think the manslaughter in this particular case is appropriate. I believe the statute of limitations is 20 years on that.
The statute of limitations is up on manslaughter.
Yeah, so it's up on manslaughter. So again, this woman obviously lived with this for the last 32 years.
Chief, you mentioned that she had said to you, had the safe haven laws set in place, she would have taken advantage.
Yes.
Just looking forward and looking at safe haven laws as a whole, how do they work to prevent stuff like this happening?
Well, I believe it was 2001, that Connecticut adopted the safe haven law. I know Chief Kaczynski, who's also here, was there that day. He had gone to the state capitol and testified regarding the need. So at this point in time, any mother that's in this type of situation can go to a police station, fire station, emergency room, drop the baby off without any concern of any criminal charges.
Have you seen an impact on cases like this because of those laws?
Yes, there are people that have, how many cases are there since 14?
I think there was 33 approximately in the past 10 years or so. I was reading. There are statistics that the state of Connecticut keeps.
You said the safe haven law. What would have happened had she brought the infant to the fire station or police department directly to?
She would not be subject to any criminal charges at the time in 1988 if the law existed, and
but because it didn't, what would have happened?
I mean, if she were, obviously that was the thing to do. I'm sure the baby would have been adopted. So, the right thing to do obviously would have been to bring the baby to an emergency room to make sure it was medically sound, or a fire department, or a police department, at the point in time. But again, she made the decision.
Could she have faced charges if she chose to bring it to a hospital back then?
I don't know if anybody would have pursued it at the time, because that was the right thing to do.
Was she interviewed in the original, I mean, I know you went back several times canvassing the neighborhoods around there. Was she a person that was actually interviewed during the original investigation or over
No.
the years?
No.
Did she give birth at home?
Pardon me?
Did she give birth to David at home?
Yes. By herself.
May I make a remark?
Sure.
I'd like to just make a final remark. I would encourage everyone to upload to GEDmatch, but also I'd like to say you have to opt in the law enforcement use of your DNA. It's not really your DNA, it's just your list of DNA cousins. So it's not really your DNA at all. I want to encourage this, but also more importantly, I want you to read about it and make your own decision. I have no problems with doing this, opting in, the law enforcement. But please make an informed decision. Don't react. Get informed. I also want to say that I don't believe in closure. I've dealt with many of these cases. All I believe in is release and information that allows us to go on with our lives. I don't believe there is such a thing as closure because we can't go back and undo the past. So in the end, I want to thank the Meriden Police Department for hanging in so long. Like I say, I started in 2012. I'm a basic newcomer here, but I'm very glad to have been part of this to bring release and information to everyone so we can go on from here. Thank you very much.
Are there any more questions?
Just about her name.
I'll be on the document I give you. I'll give everybody a copy.
Chief, the investigation is still continuing?
It's continuing in reference to we're closing up the part with the father, the ID. We have a little bit of work to do there yet, but at this point in time, we do not believe he knew anything about it at the time. That's it. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.